Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Shift. I'm Jackie Wins, and I'm here with my buddy, Jason Ray. What's going on, Jason?
Oh, not much. It's hard to believe that we're in April, and we're like a month away, 5 weeks away from postseason starting. But it's crazy how quickly everything goes. But excited to be here to talk about softball and all the things that we got upcoming this weekend.
Absolutely. It was an electric weekend, right, with the OU and LSU series being the second most watched that Sunday game in softball collegiate history on ESPN's network. So there was a lot of people watching softball. It doesn't matter which day of the series weekend it was. But there is, you're right. There's a ton to talk about. So let's get to it, as we always do, with State of the Diamond. For those who are new to the pod, just want to let you know that the State of the Diamond is really like what's going on, what's happening across softball right now. And we take it in different directions every weekend, so just depending on what happens. But Jason, where are you at?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I'm interested in here as we continue to go through the stretch of the last part of the regular season is some of the midweek games, right? So I think we've seen in the past, on both sides of it, right? Like we've seen some teams cancel some of these midweek games because of kind of RPI placement and things like that. But then we've seen a lot of these teams that are challenging themselves like down the stretch in some of these midweek games. Like I think Nebraska plays Omaha, which with Matty Groff, that's a decent game, right? And so we saw that they struggled a little bit yesterday against Creighton, and then they pulled away late. So Florida plays Florida State a couple of times. I know that Oklahoma plays Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State plays Texas. And so I think just kind of watching to see how those games, impact, not only seedings, but how those games kind of start impacting like RPI and things like that. And just give you, and I'm probably one of the only crazy ones that looks at this on pretty much a daily basis, but give you a perfect example, right? Texas Tech played, I think it was Abilene Christian last night. They dropped from RPI number 7 to RPI number 10. Oklahoma played Wichita State and jumped from 9 to 8. So you can see not Tennessee, but Nebraska, they played who did they play? We just talked. Creighton. They played Creighton last night, and then they dropped from 2 to 3. So there's a lot of volatility that happens in the RPI with these midweek games. So it'll be very intriguing to watch, like what that looks like. How much are these midweek games impacting the teams, and then from the committee's perspective, as we look into seedings and things like that, how do they change? And we've beat the Texas Tech drum to death, right? Like it's going to continue to be something that they have to deal with, especially like the worst thing in the world from them was Baylor is sort of struggling right now. I think they've lost 6 straight, and they've dropped out of the top 25. So I think UCF is maybe the only remaining one that they have in the top 25, which is they're sitting at 24. Arizona State's at 26. So yeah, I think those things will be very, really interesting to see how it impacts the trajectory of postseason play.
I think, to that point, I also think we see the issue of scheduling, right? So, for example, like you had Oklahoma went 2 away series and then came back and on Tuesday plays home. And let me tell you, that's tough. It's not that easy when you're going through, the 2 away series, just rough back to back as it is in the SEC. And then also now, here we are at home playing against Wichita State, which was all over X, like a potential dark horse, right? I forget which exact account, but from some notable ones in terms of postseason play. And here we go. So I can also see that there will be some teams that may cancel, that may get into that part where it's just grueling and is it best for you? But then it comes back to what you were talking about, RPI. Like, how does canceling that game impact them? Because maybe it's not even – listen, it's not the aspect of, we're nervous to play them, right? With all the stuff that's sort of happened more recently in terms of that and avoiding to play them and all of those conversations coming up. But just like the ability to keep moving forward where schedule-wise, looking from the outside in prior to the season, you're like, oh, this is great. Whatever, we'll have this midweek game. Your team may just be dead, right? And you just need that time. And so do you take that risk of either dropping an RPI, or is it worth it? Because like you said, some teams drop an RPI playing other teams. So I think it's now going to be strategic in how teams are going to look at that midweek game. But there are a ton of really good ones coming up, as you mentioned. So as a fan, I'm like, let's do this thing. But as a somebody, looking at it more strategically, I wonder how it will impact teams long term.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah.
In terms of everything else in softball, I mean, listen, you've had teams. I thought teams were performing well, overperforming, some underperforming, some weird Sunday games, and I feel like in the SEC, all Sunday games are wild. But across, overall softball, Sunday games are no longer somebody may have won the series and whatever. I feel like everyone's gunning for that game and gunning for that sweep, and so I feel like the overall weekend of softball has just gotten better.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I mean, to your point, we're seeing, it just seems, and maybe, and I don't have any stats to substantiate this, but it just seems like we're having a lot more rubber matches on Sunday. To your point, some of these series are coming down the stretch in terms of, what this looks like, and go no further than the Tennessee game or Tennessee series with Ole Miss, right? Like, Ole Miss was winless in conference, and they battled Tennessee this weekend, and obviously Oklahoma and LSU split. There was about 5 or 6 of those series, and so yeah, I mean, I think it shows. We've talked about this a lot. It shows the parity, right? Like some of these teams, like Oklahoma, UCLA, and some of the high scoring teams in non-conference, like, the pitching is just different, right? The strategy is just different. So these teams that are scoring, I mean, you don't think these teams that are scoring, 10, 12 runs a game is going to be able to continue to do that throughout conference play. So it's very interesting to see what that strategy looks like, especially on the Sunday games, because, right, when you get to postseason play, it's typically like it's 2 out of 3. I know that conference play is single elimination, but when you get into regional play and then super regional play and then Women's College World Series, it's more about a kind of a series mindset. So I think it does speak volumes to the parity that we're seeing in the game today.
Definitely. And as you mentioned, we'll talk a little bit more on that Ole Miss Tennessee series because it was notable on the weekend and did turn some heads. So we'll get to that soon. But before that, we had our next topic, Year of the Hitter. It's always the question mark. We've sort of come to the conclusion that it is the Year of the Hitter so far. But there's been some notable updates, right? So Kendall Wells, Oklahoma, breaks the SEC record as a freshman, and we still have a lot to play and a postseason to play. So, just incredible. The ability for a freshman to break an SEC record in total is just ridiculous. But in terms of coming out of her high school and travel ball, and then right now heading right in and being able to do this immediately, it says a lot. And of course you want to give Oklahoma accolades, and Patty, I said this before, she came in ready. So she's developed, she's gotten strong while she's been in the off season, but you're talking about a professional hitter right now, and it's year 1 for her. Just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think we talked about this a little bit before we went on, but I think it's interesting, kind of the maturity that she's showing beyond her years in terms of, we saw in a couple of those games against Ole Miss later in the series where they started going away, drop away, and she was having trouble laying off of it. So she struck out quite a bit on that pitch, and then she wasn't able to do a whole lot with it, but she really made some adjustments in the LSU series, especially the first couple of games that she came out. She hit it well. And then in game 3 on Sunday, and then you saw last night where she hit a home run on, again, another drop away going opposite field. So I think maturity well beyond her years, looking at that, right? So 27 home runs. I mean, I think she certainly has the opportunity to break. I mean, I think that's the thing that you'll continue to see and you'll continue to watch. Does she have enough? Will she have enough down the stretch with the pitching that she's gonna see? Does she have enough opportunities to break that single season record of 37, which, is well within reach, right? But then the other thing is the Oklahoma record, which is 30, I believe. Regular season record of freshman record of Jocelyn Allo of 30. So I think she hit 30 another year. She hit 32, including the postseason and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think the good thing about Kendall is when you look at the Oklahoma lineup, she's got plenty of protection around her, right? So teams don't have the luxury of being able to kind of pitch around her like they may be able to do, like a Megan Durant or something like that in the from a UCLA perspective. So yeah, it's very, very impressive. I think a lot of us, as we talked about, what are some of the freshmen to watch? I mean, I think we knew Kendall Wells was going to be special, but I don't think anyone knew that she was going to be quite this good early on. I think in our preseason predictions from a Softball America perspective, I had said that she has a chance to hit between 15 and 20 home runs this year. So blew my expectations out of the water, even myself. So.
And what is interesting, you mentioned this before, and I was having this conversation on X somewhere, maybe in the DMs, I can't remember, but what that came up from a different fandom. Do you think now people are going to start walking here? I do. I think that when you're in a tight spot, and while I 100% agree, I also think that it's going to be harder to walk her. I think it's going to be very strategic, because before, when Jocelyn Allo was here, right, you did have power hitters, but they weren't, in my opinion, as consistent, right? And they were very versatile. So there was the hit or miss, in that. I mean, you knew they were all capable, right, of hitting home runs, which is what, really made them elite and be able to 4P, right? But in terms of it all, she's placed between home run hitters. So, it's like, do you risk putting her on base? Do you want to just do, a solo and then maybe, let the next one go and try and get that one, and instead of having two on and immediately, and you're potentially putting two, I don't know. It's going to be a big question, because this past weekend, since we saw her break from the fact that she couldn't hit, low and away, and then now she can, the strategy is going to have to change again. Right. And so I don't know. I don't know where you pitch to her, right. And you just make her chase and very much so become unpredictable when you face her. But it's going to be unique. I'm interested to see, Kentucky, what they do. Because I think that they're going to see the challenge with their pitching against not only Kendall, but the top of that lineup in specific. But we will see. I think we're going to see, the next coming weekends a little bit more of how teams are going to approach her. But I do have this feeling that even with the home run hitters around her, there's going to be strategy in place and how to deal with her. But that will be up to JT and Patty to determine how to move that lineup if they want to, if they see that coming. Because then you strategically use her, right? It's that's what happened with Jocelyn after a while. So, it's going to be interesting, but her ability to be great is clearly seen. There was a lot of talk on the Twitter verse Xverse about, Kendall being, potentially freshman of the year, but not making it be the player of the year, but Grant from UCLA being player of the year. And, clearly some OU fans, it's hard when you don't, especially UCLA is now in the Big Ten. We don't really see a lot of their games, but Grant's having an incredible year as a senior and hitting bombs. And so when people are like, well, why would she get player of the year if Kendall, let's say, has more home runs, XYZ? And I think it comes down to more than that. It's not just about hitting home runs. It's more. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, to your point about freshman of the year, I think there would have to be some major developments one way or the other for her not to get freshman of the year, right? Whether it be conference or nationally. But I think sometimes the player of the year kind of tends to tends to be a little bit more of a kind of a career achievement award from time to time, right? If they have the stats to back it up, and with you've got several options like that she's going to be battling against, right? Specifically some seniors that have been there and are playing, kind of. And I know you're going to talk about this, but some of those other players that are really kind of two-way players. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that. Now she may get to the point where if she breaks the single season record, if she goes past 37 home runs, like you can't just not give it to her because she's a freshman, So, but yeah, that'll be something to obviously to follow, because you've got Megan Grant, who did get injured a little bit in their series against Nebraska, but Jordan Woolery has, she's the RBI leader in the country right now. So there's plenty of, it'll be fun to watch down the stretch to see how some of these players continue to play as the competition gets a little tougher and what that looks like.
Definitely. And I think that, one thing you mentioned to segue into the second part of this, segment in the way is why really, there's big hitters are here. But also the flip side is, where are all these aces? Because I felt like for a couple of years, it was it literally was the year of the ace. It was prolific aces winning, really winning and nobody being able to even hit them. And so, I've thought about this, Jason, and I've seen more two-way hitters come from travel ball than I've seen prior. And sometimes people say they're two-way, but they're really just not P4 level at the plate, but amazing in the circle, or vice versa. And I feel like there maybe is this new trend. And I don't even like the word new, to be fair, because you can go back to Kalani Ricketts and so on for two ways existed. But just more of this expectation that someone is going to be playing both sides. And I'm almost wondering how that is impacting development at the youth level right now, right? And then getting back up. Does that mean that there's not as much intense focus? And I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just observing. Is there not as much intense focus on you're developing your different pitches because you're splitting your time? And if you're in high school and you're trying to figure out life, right, and you're doing whatever you can, and now you're splitting it, trying to be a lead up both continuously, that's tough. That's tough. So you're taking hours away that you could be pitching wise. And then you have to wait, a year or two for further development in college, or hope and pray that your stuff's good enough. But it's not keeping up, right? The ability to hit, things like that, it's just the strength and conditioning. It's all tailored to that. So where are pitchers right now? And interestingly enough, I was thinking about this because you have some amazing athletes who are two-way and some people who I think try to do two-way and they're just not there, but they try. Right? Like Alyssa Parker for me, for OU, is an amazing athlete. 1,000% goes two-way. Started two-way at Oklahoma. Has been more, we've seen her, a little bit, out there defensively, but has been more now focusing on pitching, right? And so that's where I say, her ceiling, both defensively and in the circle, is very high. But you can see there's a shift. And so that's what got me thinking of, she's clearly good at the play. She's always development, you're a freshman. But there needs to be development in the circle if she plans on playing, do so on. And you saw the development when she sort of pulled away defensively this past series. And you can see it jump off, right? And it looks different than from the top of the season. And yes, Jen's been back, but it's been like a weekend. So, it's different. And I'm wondering if long-term and interesting, if the fans want to comment, things like that, people who are in the travel ball world, if they're seeing it, because it's got to have some impact somewhere. You're taking time away. And, for me, it was something that I want to say, I think this is why we're going more towards hitter than pitching.
Yeah. You're right. I think the pitching is certainly, I think there's a couple ways to look at it, right? So is the pitching not quite as good as it has been, or is just the technology and the weight room stuff and everything that we've seen from a hitting perspective, is that just making it look like it's not quite as good, right? Because we still have some We still have 3 or 4 staffs that have an under a 2 ERA. So I think, a couple of things that are in my mind kind of lead to this, and obviously, yeah, I'd love to get the feedback from the travel ball side and those that are coaching these younger kids, because to your point, yeah, there are a lot more two-way players that we've seen in the past, and so is kind of the mindset of we want to create these players to be a little bit more of a two-way player coming out of travel ball, coming out of high school, because we understand the day of the 1-0 game, the day of the 2-1 game. I mean, does it still happen? Sure, yeah, it does, but it's few and further between than it did before. So teams got to focus on, we've got to be able to be in a position where every game we're scoring 4 to 5 runs, or we're in danger of not winning these games, winning these series. So I think, from a mindset perspective, it could be different, right? And I think the other thing is it's more of a staff approach, right? I mean, yeah, do you see some of these aces kind of come more to the forefront towards postseason, and for sure, right? But I think it has lended itself to more of a staff situation for a lot of these, for a lot of these teams. Like, even when you look at the most dominant pitchers right now, like, when you look at like Carlin Pickens, when you look at Jordy Fromm, when you look at Nigel Kennedy, when you look at some of these teams, it's a staff. Like, it's a complete staff. You got 2 and 3 pitchers that are starting, through weekend series and things like that. So, I mean, I think that kind of, to a certain degree, kind of takes it out of it and makes it look a little bit like worse than it is from a pitching perspective. But no, I think you're completely right, because it's really hard this day and age for some of these kids to focus on both equally. You got to give up one. You'd mentioned Alyssa Parker, who'd sort of kind of backed away a little bit on the, she hasn't been in the regular lineup as much lately, right? So she's kind of focused in on pitching. So, I mean, I think that will be really key to watch for Oklahoma as they go down the stretch here, to see, does she turn into what does that look like? Does she end up playing every day a little bit? Because I think, Sydney Barker struggled a bit at the plate, right? Since she kind of took over that spot. Does Patty feel like she has more of a need to have her bat in there? Or does she feel like she has a greater need for that depth in the circle when it comes? So I think that's what a lot of these coaches are going to have to kind of play in the back of their mind. Like, where are we struggling the most? Where do I need the most? Where do I need the most punch? Like, do I need this punch in the batting lineup? I need to put some more runs up on the board? Or am I struggling with depth in the circle? Do I need to have this person ready in case someone else struggles, and what did that look like? But no, yeah, I completely agree with your sentiment. It's different. I think it's a much different mindset, and you're seeing a large majority of these pitchers two-way. There's not a lot of them anymore that are just they are just pitching. They're just sticking with pitching. So
agreed. It's different, right? And like I said, I hesitate. I feel like I don't know enough about the history of the two-way hitter, but to say that it's something that's new, but it is something that we are seeing a little more prevalent in the recent era. So let's keep moving on into our next one. Thrivers versus non-thrivers, my favorite segment. So I love this because, remember, for anybody who's sort of new or listening on in, we don't mean season overall. We could also mean just this weekend, the series. We're just saying, good performances versus, these teams are a little bit like, what's happening? And so number one thing I'm going to say is I think the Tennessee Ole Miss series showed both sides of this, thriver and non-thriver. I think this past weekend, Ole Miss left OU. We now has to face Pickens and Tennessee, right? Another gauntlet, and they win the series. So, I don't even know how to even frame that and how great that is, just because it's head turning. And I don't mean that negatively against Tennessee at all, because I think Tennessee is a good team. I think they had a really bad weekend and sort of in a slump, which is why I think they're not thriving right now. It almost felt like when Pickens got hurt that it was like a hiccup, and the team comes together and the pen plays well, and they're sort of, they're finding a groove just because they're like, we must move on, right? And she'll be all right, but she'll dress. So she comes back, and I almost feel like there was like an adrenaline rush and dump, and that they're in this mode. And I think they get out of it, and I think they're very lethal when they get out of this, which is why it's scary, because if they drop too much in let's say an RPI, or what the committee thinks of for seedings and so on, they can be lethal in certain regionals, super regionals. They'll host, but in terms of super regional, like who that gets paired with, that's scary. So in many ways, I do think that they come out of it. I don't think that this is just how they stay. I would be nervous if this continued. But cheers to Ole Miss, man, because you can't. It's hard to go to a powerhouse and just win. And they just did it, and good for them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think there's been a lot of chatter, on X or just wherever, right? In terms of Tennessee, is it time to panic? Is it time to worry about them? I'm sort of in the area of like, I'm with you. I mean, I think they'll break out of it. Like, I mean, they're not going to be a UCLA or a Florida or Texas Tech or Oklahoma at the plate, right? They're never. That's not who they are. But they're just so good in the circle, and they're so deep that they don't have the same margin of error as some of these teams that maybe don't have that same depth in the circle, right? So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to watch them. I mean, they host South Carolina this weekend, so it'll be interesting to watch them, see how they rebound off of that, because I think when you see this, like a team like Ole Miss upset them in game one, you're like, okay, it's one game. You look for the favorite or the dominant team to come back, but they really never did. Even Sunday, they really didn't, right? I mean, they won that game on a walk. So I think it'll be very kind of interesting to see them over the next couple of weeks, to see how they kind of how they mature and how they get through this as well. But yeah, I mean, kudos to Ole Miss, like you said, like team that struggled, hadn't won a game in conference, I believe, if I have that right. They haven't won a game in conference until this weekend, and they go beat the number one, number two team in the country, somewhere in that neighborhood, however you want to look at it. So, I mean, I think it's very cliche to say, right? But I think it just shows kind of what the life of the SEC team is, right? I mean, there's no real easy. I mean, even when you think you have like an easier weekend, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to that exactly. So that's why like these teams that are able to get sweep with, Oklahoma was able to get a sweep from Auburn, and Ole Miss, and Texas was able to get a couple of sweeps and things like that. Like those series sweeps are so important when you kind of build some of that equity into the later part of the conference season as well. So.
I agree. It was interesting to see it. And I will say this in terms of some other teams that I thought, I feel like they're thriving in many different ways, but I do think like Alabama, we probably haven't talked too much about, but I think that they are thriving their own way. Brisky throwing really well overall on the season. If I'm looking at it, I mean, I don't know about you, but I was like, all right, here we go, another Bama team, and where are they going to end up? But a little bit here, a little bit there. But I think it was key that Brisky is throwing well, and she's performing at a high rate for them, which they needed. Like truthfully, they needed her to do that. So good for her. But if we look at LSU, I thought that. And we spoke beforehand, and we do mention them, often here. But in this light, I actually think that we cheers to them for playing a decent series with OU, and actually prepared, really, really well for OU. And we spoke about this, but it's one thing to go in the right, like you have your staff and you have your players and you have your momentum of where you're at. And they have not had that momentum in the positive favor in some of their series, straight up. But I think that, and I think that their staff prepared well for OU and really scouted the pitches that they needed to throw and the pitchers and anything. God bless them. But I don't even know, but like they knew exactly which corners to hit, and they did it. Their execution was flawless. Game 3 was a little tough for them, but in terms of game 1 and 2, I mean, they executed well. They almost caught OU the first game, and unfortunately at the end, fortunately for them, it didn't go their way. But I actually thought that they played really, really well against OU, and that the preparation was key. And I think that's what I've been missing from LSU is that, when we saw that first month or so, it felt like they weren't even prepared to be there at certain points. And you can tell when you prepare your team well, they can do it. And people will say, oh, well, do they really have the talent that you can't win a Women's College World Series? I mean, they were competing. So if they prepared like that every weekend, and I know that we have another segment coming up in terms of, the different series that are going to be happening. But I actually think this past weekend, despite losing the series, in this instance, their performance, they were a thriver compared to their prior. So, cheers to them in terms of figuring out that they can do it. They can. And their coaches showed that if they could scout and do it all. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think to your point, I think it was one of the better, game plan strategy that we've seen over the last couple of years against the Oklahoma offense. And credit to them. Now, I think there's part of it to having that strategy, but credit to their pitchers for being able to execute game 1 and game 2 and for a few innings in game 3 as well. I mean, they executed that flawlessly, right? I mean, they had the entire Oklahoma fan base wonder, okay, what's wrong, right? What's wrong with the team? Why we're hitting home runs like crazy? We're scoring runs in bunches, and now we've got 3 runs, 1 game, and almost shutout until the 7th inning, both games, right? So it's something that you just don't see out of an Oklahoma team. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how LSU picks this up. As we talked before, their SEC schedule is not incredibly tough down the stretch. I believe they've got Missouri this weekend. I think they've got Auburn, and so some of the kind of the lower half of the SEC. So seeing how they build on that. So just some other ones that I had just from you're spot on about Alabama. I think obviously you find out a little bit more what that looks like moving forward. But I think Florida State sweeping Clemson. I think again we haven't talked a ton about Florida State because they have a really good record. They're at 32-4, but we kind of feel like their performance have been a little bit up and down. The ACC, is not necessarily incredibly strong from top to bottom in terms of when you compare them against the SEC, but still, that was a really, really, really good series for them going and sweeping Clemson at Clemson over the weekend, and then Nebraska winning 2 out of 3 against UCLA. Right? I think they're right there now. They've kind of set themselves a little bit apart because of their schedule down the stretch. They don't have Washington, they don't have Oregon, so they've got they've got UCLA out of the way. So their schedule sets up for them to be pretty successful down the stretch. It would have to be an upset for them to get beat before their conference tournament. So I think that's those are some of the thrivers that I saw over the weekend from my perspective.
Yeah, I forgot. Like I said, I think, and I don't understand why, because I was following the series, but the Nebraska UCLA series was fabulous. So both thriving, love it out there, and I think both of those teams just do so well in the postseason. So excited for that. Heading into our next segment, teams that need to have a good weekend. So 100%. Sort of on the flip side of what I just said, while LSU had a great weekend, they still lost the series, and they're a little bit in danger of a few different things. So in my eyes, you're playing Missouri. They can win it, right? I do. I think, honestly, I think both sides, I think LSU, based off what they showed this past weekend, should win it. But if they don't execute and they don't prepare as well as they did for OU, I think you can get a Missouri sneak of a game and then potential really wild game 3. So for me, they need this series. Like they need it because your rest of your schedule is, a little wonky here and so on. And I suspect they're going to be okay, but like you need the momentum at some point, like, because otherwise you're going to put all this sweat equity in and you keep losing series. I mean, it does a lot.
Yeah. Oh, completely agree. So on the flip side of what I mentioned with Florida State, so Clemson for me. So I think Clemson was a trendy pick, even by myself. I'll admit a trendy pick for Women's College World Series team, and they've been so up and down this year, and they've just not lived up to those expectations. They're 6-6 in conference play right now, and their schedule is pretty brutal down the stretch. They got Virginia Tech this weekend, then they play, then they have another series against Virginia. Then they have another series at Duke. So they really, I mean, it'll be a tough task with it because Virginia Tech's playing really well right now. So being able to win that series in Blacksburg will be tough, but I think they really need to have a good weekend. And another one, and I think people will probably laugh, based on the opponent, but I think it's important for Oklahoma to sweep Kentucky this weekend because when you look at where they're at in the standings and what their schedule is, Oklahoma is hosting Kentucky. But then when you look at the series remaining, Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, Texas A&M, like those are all tough series, right? So there's no break, right? If you've got a midweek game against Oklahoma State in there, kind of mixed in there as well. So really to kind of build. So I think I don't remember exactly what the conference record is, but they only have one loss. I think it's like 11-1, something like that. And so being able to, or maybe it's 7-1, either way, only has the one loss, but being able to build that record up so you can take a couple of losses in some of those games or some of those series coming up. So, and I think all eyes are obviously going to be in Austin. I believe it's next weekend when they go to Austin for that series against Texas. So, yeah, I think that'll be. I mean, you'll learn about that. Exactly what that looks like. And I think and we talked a little bit about Alabama and Texas. I don't know that I would necessarily say like if there's either one, like they've got to have a good weekend. But I think this is really. I think this is a good test for Alabama, right? A really good test to see. I mean, the Rose House is going to be like insane. I'm sure this weekend.
I would think.
So, but just to see how to your point, like Jocelyn Brisky's been one of the most improved pitchers in the country. She struggled with walks a little bit last year, and she's really not at all this year. She's hammering the zone, and she's just been very, very good. So being able to see how they play and how Texas plays in that environment, right? I mean, it's they're a veteran team. They've played in these games, in these series, right? So, but just seeing how they play and how both teams, kind of react to that series, that environment, it'll be really fun to watch.
Talk about if softball fans are not watching, their own games, then that is a series I would want to watch. It is going to be interesting. This is what I will say about that. I think both teams need this to be let me better rephrase that. Nobody wants to be swept. Okay. I think that's important. So I am hopeful that even if, let's say, Texas or Alabama wins the first two or whatever, that there is a game 3 like different winner, because I do think that that's important, especially if they can do the split, game 1 and 2, one win and the other one, whatever, and then the third. I think that makes this story incredible and very hard to predict where you place them afterwards. But in terms of it all, I think if unless it's a blowout, I think both teams sort of win by this, by playing each other. And like I said, as long as they can keep it close, I will say this: if they're able to pick Brisky, they're in trouble, because if you just, I don't know where you go eventually. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're Alabama, like they're able to see her, and their pitch caller is not able to mix and match and really hide those things, and she starts walking, or it's just, or they just see her well. That's dangerous, because once Texas starts hitting, very similar to Oklahoma in that way, it moves. So it's going to be crucial for Alabama to stay close, because they have home run hitting power too. And they passed that well. But Texas has been playing consistently good, and that's really important to know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we talked about just a second ago when I mentioned Oklahoma, like Texas is kind of in the same boat in terms of their schedule, right? They're at the meat of their schedule in terms of when it's the toughest. They go to Alabama, they host Oklahoma next weekend, then the following weekend they go to Georgia. So those are three. I mean, you can even go back last week or this past weekend to Texas A&M. Those are four really big series in a row. So I mean, like I said, there's no weak points in the SEC, right? There's no days off, but there's definitely no days off in the next few weeks for Texas for sure. So really important for them to continue to be where they're at.
Yeah, plus the midweek games. They are loaded. For sure. But overall, it's going to be an interesting couple weekends here around softball, specifically around the SEC. I think the Big Ten has sort of settled itself out. As you may have a couple good series, but lightly predictable from here on out. ACC is going through the ups and downs, like you said. A couple good series here and there. Big 12, same idea. Sort of predictable. Where the SEC is right now it's still quite up in the air. What the heck's going to happen there? But it's what makes it fun and interesting. So, all right, everybody. First and foremost, thanks as always for tuning on in to the shift of a From the Stands podcast. Always From the Stands is free. It is something that you can go and you can look up and join our Patreon. We sometimes have little articles that come through. We're all volunteers, and as things get busy, things slow down. As we get more available, things pick up. But Jason and I do try and at least ensure that we do and have the shift for you every Wednesday, just right here, so you are ready to go for the next following weekend and series. But as always, please ensure that you like, subscribe, do all the things, so that this way, we can create the following and you can get the information. We appreciate you, and we thank you as always, and we'll see you next time on the shift. Peace out.